I was tempted to take the opposite line to the question and argue that actually the problem is not education, it is the economy. And there's a little bit in there that's true. But actually, I think the bigger problem is our understanding of how the two relate to each other, which I think we find really problematic and really difficult. In one sense, there should be quite a healthy tension between the two. The way in which we think about, or should think about education is very much, I think, about politics, not economics. It's about democracy. It's about opportunity. It's about the fact that nobody knows what the untapped potential are of children when they start the school system. So actually we have to create a system that doesn't know what the outcome might be for that individual. And actually that's quite complicated and quite difficult to do. It's also about community. It's about building people's identities. It's about social trust. It's about bonding and cohesion. In areas like Alun, where I work, these are incredibly important issues when you've got high degrees of turnover of the population. The role of education in bonding people together and helping people to develop identities. It goes well beyond some of the issues around the dry side of kind of curriculum design and all the other things we sometimes talk about. It's also about shared values. It's about what our common inheritance is. It's about drawing together those things in ways that allow people to live comfortably together and live successful lives. But it's also an economic good. And this is where it does become complicated, because whilst we want an education system that gives everybody equal opportunity, we have an economy where that just does not happen. An economy which actually, education is one of the most divisive things. Those who do well in the education system, and the system is designed a bit like the Grand National, the aim is you start off with an awful lot of horses on a very, very long race, and the aim of the fence is to make some of you fall over so that only a small number of you get to the end. And actually, the higher we raise the bar in terms of school attainment and school performance, actually the next minister comes along and they move the goalposts, because you can't have everybody doing that well. And the reason you can't have everybody doing that well is that it's an element of the education system that's just a big, what my friend who's a football coach calls a picking pot. He uses that term to describe the way academies recruit young people into play for their academies. We've got lots of different football teams in Manchester, lots of young people get picked for academies, but actually hardly anybody's going to make it as a footballer because it's just a picking pot. We'll have you and you and you because you seem to be the best. And that's actually one of the points Alison Moore makes in her book about education and the economy, is that Russell Group universities are the picking pot for blue chip companies. And the whole system ends up being designed almost as if it's about the needs of those companies and where then does everybody else fit. Because actually it leads to a lot of other people being the ones that have fallen over those hurdles of fences along the way, and the rest of us have to spend our time trying to repair them to try and find ways of them finding their successful selves again. However, given that issue around the way in which the economy and the education system work together, there are some points I think are very important in terms of how we might think about it in a less muddled way. The first problem we have, and I think Melissa alluded to this, is that lots of ways in which people think, policymakers and ministers in particular, and I'm not talking about particular parties here, I just think politicians tend to do this, is they do think about the relationship in a very reductionist way. They think about the relationship in terms of skills as being about skills gaps in the economy and mismatches and alignments in terms of how do we make the system fit the needs of employers. Many of those skills gaps are badly misunderstood. Labour markets are markets. That means they don't work perfectly all the time. That means there are times when employers can't find the skills they need, and employers need to pay more to get people to incentivise acquiring those skills. And some of what the public system is expected to do rightly belongs with the employer, not with the public sector to do. Why? Because it's the employer's job to train people to do the particular jobs in their organisation. It's the public's job, it's our job, to develop the general level of knowledge and skills that people can need in order to participate on a reasonable basis. The two are not quite the same thing. And I think a misunderstanding of those issues leads to an awful lot of bad policy and misconceptions which are wasteful for people and in terms of public money. We've lived with a generation after generation of what I would call supply-side tinkering around the efforts to match the economy with the education system and the other way around. And supply-side means the constant re-examining of governance, curriculum, vocational, academic, constant changes in making the education system work differently, without recognising that actually this is about both the education system and the economy at the same time. The converse of that is an economic view that actually employers don't really invest in skills, and there's a huge dysfunction there. And the two actually end up both in the same place of blaming either the educationalists or the employers for something that's actually a bit more complicated than either of those things. And I do worry as well about the third aspect of that, the extent to which information, advice and guidance is constantly recycled as the solution to that problem. Usually what that means is that somebody's decided that young people aren't making the choices that we think they ought to. It's usually other people's children, by the way, and it usually means they're making choices to do technical professional jobs. Apprenticeship is a very good example that people don't want their children to do but think everybody else's ought to, and IAG is there to persuade other people's children to do them. It ignores a really fundamental problem for me, which is young people make choices based on the same way the rest of us do. They make assessments about their future, and the fact of the matter is that vocational routes in this country don't have the parity that academic routes have. That's not because people's thought processes are wrong. They're actually, the qualifications are designed in the wrong way, and I want to come back to that theme later on. I want to just to get there, I want to talk a little bit about another big misconception in terms of the way we think about skills, and this is the idea that we can somehow plan an education system that will meet the needs of the economy in a very neat and orderly way. It sometimes leads to the views that if we only reanalyse the future of the economy really, really well, we could decide we need so many plumbers and so many engineers and so many this and so many that. And actually, all of the data that people use to make those guesstimates always prove to be wrong. Because actually, it just isn't that simple. The converse side of that is something that I think has been had a really negative impact on policy, which is the idea that you can't predict particular skills people need, but you can analyse an economy that requires high-level skills, and it leads to a view that's particularly prominent amongst awarding bodies and others. So Michael Barber is a particular hold of this view, and he is the chief advisor to Pearson's. Pearson's have BTEC and a whole range of other qualifications and sell them all over the world indiscriminately. And they champion the notion that the economy is characterised by 21st century skills. And 21st century skills, what you know isn't as important as the fact that you can acquire knowledge, that you can learn to learn, for example, or you have the skills to learn. And I think that's a real problem. I think it's a really big problem, and I think it's enshrined in a lot of the qualifications we have, increasingly so on the vocational side, and I do think it's something that we need to address. It's based on a theory of the knowledge economy, and the idea of the knowledge economy is that increasingly jobs are driven by high-level skills and high-level knowledge, and a theory of the labour market that at the top level, high-level skills are going to produce high rewards for people who get a very good education. The jobs in the middle are hollowing out, and then we've got the levelling out at the bottom with a lot of people with low-level skills and low-wage jobs. In broad terms, that shape of the labour market is true, but the notion that young people, or anybody, just by virtue of getting high-level skills, are going to be rewarded by those high-level jobs is not true. And far too many people end up going through the system thinking that if I get those high-level skills, we call them level 4, 5 and 6, that's the equivalent of a degree, level 3 is the equivalent of A-levels. If they get to those high levels of skills, their future will be fine because they'll be able to benefit from those high-value jobs. And the fact is, the labour market doesn't work like that. High-value jobs exist, and a small number of people benefit from them hugely. You only have to look at Wall Street and the City of London to know that in extremis, but it's true in a general sense all over the economy. There are far more jobs in the middle section than people think, and there's some jobs which seems to be immune from that hollowing out, and they're jobs that people look down on. Hairdressing. You can't digitalise hairdressing. Any of you who think you can will have a real shock. You can't digitalise bricklaying. These are core things that continue to be part of our employment skills strategy, and should do. But it's also the case that we do end up with this notion that if you throw yourself at the education system and get those high-level skills, somehow the rewards will be there, and that isn't necessarily the case. So,
in conclusion,
I'm going to come through quickly. We've seen in education a serious move back towards a knowledge-based curriculum in secondary schools. In part, I agree with a lot of what you say about the way schools have become very sterile, but I also think that knowledge-based curriculum is very important, because powerful knowledge is the thing that allows people to live economically and politically much more free lives. And that doesn't just apply in terms of academic, and that's where I think we're on the same page. I think we've seen that focus in academic curriculum in schools very strongly. We've not seen it in vocational. There are vocational qualifications you can do, licensed by people like BTEC. I'll give you an example. You can go to college and you can do a level 2 in electrical engineering, and a level 3, that means you've got an A-level in electrical engineering, and you aren't qualified to practice. That's an absolute scandal. You can spend 3 years at college acquiring a level 3 electrical qualification, and you're not able to practice because you don't have the technical certificates that go with that to make you active in the labour market. And that's a terrible failing. And where we're absolutely on the same page is, the big problem is this. Educationists do daft things because they work in daft systems. Our system is over-regulated in terms of it manages performance, not learning. It's obsessed with league tables. It promotes gaming and cheating, and anybody that says it's gone away is lying. It's there right the way through the system. We have to do it, because if we don't do it, Ofsted come knocking on the door and tell us that what we're doing is wrong. And if Ofsted don't come, then other people come. So that aspect, I think, that last bit is where we're bang on the same page. The policy is part of the problem, and we need a policy that is about learning and not about performance.
Thanks, Alan.